Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, a Ugandan filmmaker lands in jail for filming a documentary about the young politician challenging President Yoweri Museveni. Moses Bwayo could face charges of unlawful assembly. Also, in West Africa, Ivory Coast is the country most affected by statelessness. Around 700,000 people there have no official nationality, and the number is growing. And he loves me not. The world's largest nut is surprisingly sexy. The coco de mer looks a bit like a bum, and Seychelles islanders go out of their way to protect the fortunes of this rare and erotic national symbol. But first, a filmmaker's landed in jail after filming a documentary on opposition politician Bobi Wine. Moses Bwayo was first arrested last month. He was freed, but ordered to appear in court on Wednesday. He is now back in prison and could face charges of unlawful assembly. Police accuse him of singing a song in support of Wine, who is a challenger to President Yoweri Museveni. His critics accuse him of escalating a crackdown on opposition ahead of next year's presidential elections. Michael O'Hagan tells us more about how Bwayo got caught up.
Moses is a filmmaker and a video journalist who has worked for international media outlets, including the BBC. In 2017, when Bobi Wine, who, as you say, is a very popular Ugandan pop singer, was elected to Parliament, Moses was put under contract with a UK-based production company to film a documentary about Bobi Wine, whose real name is Robert Chaguilanye. As you say, Georgia, last week Moses was documenting Bobi Wine record a music video when he was arrested by a group of police and soldiers in the capital, Kampala. He was taken to a police station where he was held for 2 days without access to a lawyer, and his wife says that she saw him being kicked by police officers. He was released on police bond and told to report back today. When he did, he was detained again and taken to court for a judge to rule whether he should be detained while the case went ahead. Government lawyers weren't able to submit any evidence in court today, and a magistrate, sent Moses to Luzira prison till the next hearing on Friday. Despite some recent improvements, Human Rights Watch have condemned conditions in Ugandan prisons, and they've described that prisoners on remand sometimes undergo forced labour and are subject to violence by prison guards.
So, Michael, is there much to these fears that life is getting particularly more difficult for journalists under Museveni as he prepares for elections next year?
Yes, as you say, President Museveni faces elections in 2021, and Moses' arrest is part of a pattern of attempts to intimidate and bully journalists under President Museveni's rule. President Museveni came to power in 1986 at the head of a rebel army. Last year, the communications regulator ordered radio and TV stations to suspend 39 news editors and producers who had reported on Bobi Wine, accusing them of broadcasting, quote, extremist messages. And also last year, a BBC team investigating allegations of large-scale theft of medicines from public stores were arrested, and some had to go into hiding. RSF, a Paris-based press freedom organisation, ranks Uganda as 125th out of 180 countries for press freedom. That's several places below Afghanistan, for example.
Michael Hagan there for us in Kampala. Look now at some news in brief. Sudan's central bank says that the US has finally lifted sanctions on 157 Sudanese firms. The penalties were brought in originally 2 decades ago in connection to the conflict in the turbulent region of Darfur. The end of the trade embargo was first announced in 2017, even though the country has stayed on Washington's list of state sponsors of terrorism. Sudan's working on reviving its economy and rebuilding its international relations in the wake of the ousting last April of longtime leader Omar al-Bashir. He's still wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and genocide in Darfur. Ethiopia has accused the US of being undiplomatic in its efforts to facilitate talks over the construction of the largest hydropower plant in Africa. Washington stepped in to support mediation efforts between Addis, Egypt, and Sudan after being asked to do so by Cairo. The countries all lie along the Nile, and Egypt fears that Ethiopia's project will affect its share of the river's waters. Last week, the Treasury Department in the US claimed that a deal had been reached, but Ethiopia skipped the most recent negotiations and denies that any consensus has been reached. It says that talks must continue. Algeria has reported 9 new coronavirus cases, taking the total number of people who tested positive in the country to 17. That includes 16 from the same family and 1 Italian man. Tunisia has announced that it's suspending ferry services to northern Italy as a precaution against the spread of the disease. Nigeria and Senegal are the only sub-Saharan countries to so far have reported cases of coronavirus. Dakar on Wednesday said that its toll is now at 4, up 2. The health concerns have led the NBA to push back plans to launch the Basketball Africa League in Senegal, which had been due to happen on March the 13th. Now, in West Africa, Ivory Coast is the country most affected by statelessness. Around 700,000 people there have no official nationality, and that number is growing, as you cannot gain nationality simply by being born in Ivory Coast. Instead, one's parents must be proven to already be Ivorian. But with high levels of labour migration and a lack of record keeping by the government, the population over generations has seen a crisis.
More than 200 kilometres north of the bustling city of Abidjan, Adukru feels stuck in the past. The small village is completely surrounded by dense forests and plantations. The nearest public services are more than an hour away, along dirt tracks only suitable for motorbikes. Most families that live here don't legally exist. They are stateless and have been for generations.
My father, who brought me into this world, didn't have papers. My old man didn't have them. So how can I get papers? It's causing me a lot of problems, and it's the same issue for my children.
None of Mathieu's 7 children were able to go to school because they were completely undocumented. The 700,000 stateless people in Côte d'Ivoire cannot vote, buy land, or even SIM cards. The UN has been running campaigns to try and encourage stateless Ivorians to register with authorities.
Here, there are no schools, there's no health center. Do you know why there are no schools or health centers? It's because we don't know how many of you there are. Lots of children born here don't have birth certificates. You must register your children.
One by one, the villagers explain their situation to this NGO worker, who in return offers support and advice needed to begin the grueling quest for administrative recognition.
There are no documents that will allow us to get the papers. There are no birth certificates that can offer proof of nationality. So it is only through testimony that we'll be able to get the documents.
Once the files are handed over, it is up to a judge to decide on whether or not the villagers are granted nationality. Simply being born in Côte d'Ivoire is not enough to gain citizenship. For the hundreds of thousands of descendants of immigrants living in Côte d'Ivoire with no claim to Ivorian parentage, the challenge is even greater.
Now, it's the world's largest seed with a shape suggestive of a woman's hips and myths of its erotic and aphrodisiac properties. The coco de mer is an icon of the Seychelles, and the islands have taken drastic measures to protect the love nut. Take a look.
Christophe is a specialist cutter of the Seychelles' famous love nuts. The sea coconut is unique to the island chain and known around the world for its suggestive shape. Christophe's job is to split the husk and harvest the pulp, which is sold internationally. Some cultures consider it a powerful aphrodisiac.
Well, normally the Chinese. And also local people has a sort of superstition that they can grind it and put it in the alcohol, like whiskey, they can drink, and it gives them strength. That's a myth, you know?
Once extracted from the shell, the coconut pulp is sorted, dried, and packed for export. It's a zero-waste operation. The leftovers are processed into oil, and the empty husks glued back together and sold as souvenirs. Christophe has honed his skills for 10 years now.
You feel Seychellois when doing this type of job, and it is unique in the world. So I feel really, really, really proud.
The pulp can sell for almost $100 per kilo, and an empty husk fetches double the price. After centuries of over-harvesting, the love nut has almost disappeared. Since 2011, it's classified as an endangered plant species.
It's first of all one of the iconic natural resources that we have. And when you have an iconic natural resource, it's always under pressure.
The Seychelles have taken drastic measures to protect the love nut, which is the largest nut in the world. Harvesting is limited to under 2,000 per year. It's illegal to export the whole nut, and strict controls limit its sale. Authorities hope this will help save the unique fruit from extinction.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.